Hi, thanks for being with me today. I hope you're keeping well. I thought I'd share some thoughts with you from my quiet time today when I was studying Luke chapter 11, verses 5 to 10. It's a really well-known parable that Jesus gives about prayer. You probably know it, where Jesus talks about, a friend who goes and knocks on the door of their friend at midnight because they want some loaves of bread, and they just kind of keep repeatedly knocking. And the guy in bed says, "I'm not coming down to open the door. I'm already in bed. The kids are all asleep. Just go away and leave." And the person outside just keeps knocking and knocking and knocking. And in the end, the person goes, "Oh, all right, because of your persistence, I'm going to get out of bed. I'm going to give you the bread, and then I can go and get some sleep again." And it's a really interesting parable, isn't it, about prayer? Because we tend to think of prayer, or at least I do anyways, as kind of quite transactional and polite, that I should just ask politely of God for something in prayer, and then sort of wait politely and patiently for him to think about it for a while, and then all being well, then I will be able to receive the answer to my prayer. That's kind of how I tend to think about prayer. I don't know about you, as a sort of polite transaction. "Dear Lord, would you mind, most awfully, would you mind perhaps granting me this wish?" And then I just sit and wait patiently and see what God does with it. But this story from Luke chapter 11, verses 5 to 10, appears to be kind of like the complete opposite of that, doesn't it? It's not like a sort of polite prayer meeting between one person and God. And the person's knocking at the door, he's demanding bread, he's being rude, he's being disruptive, he's being intrusive, he's being deliberately pushy until the guy gets out of bed and gives him what he wants. And amazingly, Jesus says we should be like that when we pray. Which kind of, to me, feels upside down. It feels wrong in some ways, And I think Jesus is saying, certainly to me and maybe to you, that, I need to retrain my instincts about prayer and to think through afresh how I approach prayer. I think often we hesitate to be really bold in prayer, don't we? We feel a bit too distant from God, perhaps, to feel really confident that we can speak to God in this kind of pushy, persistent way. We tend to often talk to God in prayer as if we're a sort of tenant and He's the landlord, as opposed to being a family member of His kingdom family. But Jesus is saying here that, we don't always need to approach God with kind of polished, formulaic prayers. We should be prepared to pray with audacity, that we should be able to pray in trust, that, if we persist to the point of bordering on the uncomfortable, then God will hear us and will answer our prayers. This parable assures us that God welcomes noise at the door. He doesn't mind us being pushy and just kind of, just really going for it in prayer. So there's a few things really that I got out of this passage this morning just to share with you. And the first is this, really, that, prayer, as Jesus speaks about it here, is about disruptive friendship. It's about disruptive friendship. The world values efficiency, doesn't it? That, we kind of get things done in a very efficient way. We like results. We like to get things done quickly. We've got apps on our phones to speed up the process. We've got Amazon Prime to deliver. Other delivery companies are available, of course. But and living in London, one of the amazing things is, I can order my, a sort of a weekly food shop through Amazon, and it gets delivered within 2 hours now. It's just quite extraordinary. Speed and efficiency, 10-minute workouts, 5-minute prayer books. We want everything to be efficient and quick. But, God doesn't really fall into that category. You know, we're not in a kind of transactional relationship with God where we want it all to be really speedy and we want it to be really efficient. You know, very often, you know, we approach God in prayer like he's a vending machine. You know, we put the right amount of prayer in, press the right buttons, and then like a vending machine, the product will be delivered to us at the end. The God of this parable, it's a scandalous idea, really, that God is more like a grumpy neighbour than he is a sort of business transaction. The grumpy neighbour who gets up at midnight. You know, the man knocks at his door persistently, and the Greek word there, anaideia, that's used for persistent. It's a compound word. Ana means without, and ideia means sort of respect. If you like, you know, as a compound word, it means has no shame, without shame. The idea that the guy just without shame just keeps knocking and keeps knocking. He has no shame. He just keeps going for it. And it seems to me that Jesus is saying here that our relationship with God through prayer is an interruptive relationship. It's not polite. Jesus is encouraging you to bother God in your prayers. You know, be a bother to God, bother him. And I was thinking about myself as I was reading this passage this morning, thinking, when was the last time I actually prayed like that? When was the last time I prayed without shame and bothered God so much with prayer that he was like the grumpy neighbour who got up and went, all right, Steve, whatever, I will answer your prayer. You know, there's a real challenge to us there, I think, because it does mean, if we're going to pray like that we do need to overcome our politeness in some ways, but also overcome the idea that, you know, we can be bold, and you know, we don't need to be fearful in prayer. We don't need to be I was going to say trepidatious. Is that a word? You know, we don't need to have trepidation when we come before the throne of grace. You know, we are his beloved children, and we can just be persistent and persistent. So that's the first thing. And building on that, really, the second point I was thinking about from this passage is that, you know, it's not that God is reluctant to answer our prayers. More often than not, it's that we are not persistent enough. We don't, you know, if we pray for something, we might pray for something a few times, you know, and then, you know, if it doesn't happen, if it doesn't, you know, we say, well, prayer doesn't work. I'm not going to pray anymore. Prayer doesn't work, you know. And in my experience, you know, I've been a priest now 32 years. And, you know, in my experience, people who give up the Christian faith, more often than not, is because they feel they've been hard done by in some way. It's they feel, well, God hasn't answered my prayer, or God let this person die. That's always the big one, you know. You know, or, you know, I lost my job and then I lost my faith. You know, it's almost kind of this sense of being hard done by God. And then people go, right, I'm not going to believe in him anymore. And they sort of give up the faith. I've never really understood it, but there we are. You know, some people give up when they think prayer doesn't work. They pray for something, they don't get it, prayer doesn't work, so they give up. But in this parable in Luke chapter 11, Jesus is saying it's not that God is reluctant to give. He says in verse 9, ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be opened to you. Now, this is not a magic formula that Jesus is giving us here. He's not saying ask, seek, knock, and ta-da, you know, all your prayers will be answered. It's not a magic formula he's giving. What he's saying to us is that, you know, these words, ask, seek, and knock, are in the continuous tense. You know, you get past tense, future tense, whatever. There's a Greek tense called the continuous, which means that these are actions that are continually happening over a long period of time. So ask, seek, knock. What Jesus is actually saying is keep on asking, keep on seeking, keep on knocking. And when you think you've asked enough and you've been seeking enough and you've knocked enough, keep on asking some more, keep on seeking some more, keep on knocking some more. These are continuous actions over a long period of time. Now, when we view prayer like that, then we realize that actually praying is training us in persistence. It's training us in attention and spiritual resilience. There's a particular thing, I won't bore you with what it is, but I've been praying for it for over 3 years now. Every single day I've been praying to God for this particular thing to happen, and it still hasn't happened. And it does wind me up a bit, because I don't understand why it hasn't happened. And I actually think it would be a really good thing for me, and I think it'd be good for other people, and I like to think it'd be good for God as well. But anyway, for whatever reason, it hasn't happened. But I come back to this: keep on asking, keep on seeking, keep on knocking. 3.5 years, it's not a long time to pray for something. Just keep going and build up spiritual resilience and persistence through that. So prayer often requires effort, it requires attention, it requires persistence and resilience. And we really get that through this parable. So I would say to you, is there something that you've been praying for, but you've actually given up praying for? You think it's not going to happen? If so, do you think in the light of this parable, it might be time for you to restart your prayers on that? Just a thought. Have a think about it. Have a pray about it. Because here's the crucial point, and this is the sort of third and final point that I got out of this passage this morning, that you and I, but you are being formed by the knocking. Ask, seek, knock. These continuous actions. Prayer isn't just about getting things from God. Fundamentally, prayer is about our spiritual growth. The key thing that happens through prayer is not that you get what you've prayed for. The key thing about prayer is that you grow spiritually into the likeness of Christ through your prayers, that you attain the mind of Christ through your prayers. So we are changed through prayer. And the change that happens to us through prayer is more important than getting the thing we're praying for. We become shaped into spiritual maturity through prayer. If you are praying for something over a long period of time, like I've been praying for this thing for over 3 years now, I am growing spiritually in terms of being able to listen for God's voice. I'm becoming more resilient in my prayers. I am learning to develop a radical trust for God, that actually He has heard me, He continues to hear me, and one day He will answer. It's developing in me humility. Actually, God isn't a genie in the lamp, and I can't just kind of click my fingers and get Him to give me what I want. That's not how this relationship works. And it also is instilling in me a deeper sense of mystery and awe. I don't understand why God has not answered this prayer. His purposes must be far greater than anything I could possibly imagine. And so I have to learn to embrace that. So by God not answering this particular prayer for 3.5 years so far, I have changed dramatically. I have grown spiritually through it. And that is actually far more important than the moment when God answers the prayer. And He might say yes to it, or He might say no to it. I have no idea. But when He does say yes, or finally say no, that will not be as important a moment as what's happened to me over the last 3.5 years. So it's not so much the fact that prayers get answered, it's what happens to us through the asking that is important. So I would say to you then, in the light of this parable, keep praying, keep asking, keep seeking, keep knocking, as continuous, persistent, impolite, pushy activity. And in that, let God continue to shape you into the person that He has called you to be. He might say yes to your prayers. He might say no to your prayers. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day. What matters is that His will be done. But in the persistency, in the asking, you will grow so much spiritually as a result. I hope that's been helpful. It's a fascinating passage. Let me know your thoughts, and also let me know your experiences of prayer, either at the current time or the experiences that you've had over the years. I'd love to hear. So there we are. Thanks for being with me today, and I look forward to being with you again really soon. Take care. Bye.